Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Gassoy, representative for Ward 1. And this is the very trimmed down version of the Assessment and Accountability Committee meeting. And Jacques Patterson and Carlene Reed cannot make it, and Jessica Sutter is on her way. Off camera is Ward 3 Rep Ruth Wattenberg and Darren Fleischer, as always, here to be of assistance. So it's Friday and it's been a long week, and we're going to talk about first we're going to do some updates, and hopefully when Jessica's here she can update us on anything new with OSSE regarding their fall engagement. I was going to do a really quick high level readout on takeaways from the fall engagement that the state board did. Our session had 9 participants total, right, Darren, like throughout the 3 sessions, so not many. Really the first one was the only kind of well-attended one, I think, right? And Ruth, you were in that one. But I think, there's nothing very surprising here. The key takeaways Darren has in the memo that he sent was basically, about the layout being clear, which obviously that's important. With more contextual information than there was before, which I think is, in keeping with our recommendations. Avoid the rating and the score being the focal point, again, completely in keeping with our recommendations. Transparency. So I think this one is interesting, actually, because this might be, I think I spoke with these families who were saying they didn't know about the report card. So there were folks who had no idea what this was and thought we were talking about like kids' report cards. I'm gonna wait for Jessica.
Sorry about that. I've been sitting in the webinar waiting room and the chat was disabled, so I couldn't alert folks to that.
Oh no, I'm sorry if you texted me. I'm sorry. Well, welcome. We did get started only like 3 minutes ago. And so I was just sharing the high level takeaways, which are in that memo that I sent out about 45 minutes ago. So you can review those, but basically, the real takeaway is that most of them really align with the state board recommendations anyway, around making the display really clear and concise, but also adding some contextual information and avoiding making the scores in whatever form a focal point. But what I was just talking about was transparency is a key, is what how Darren framed some of the information we got from folks. And I think that part of this was that we spoke with some of the participants who made it clear that they didn't know about this report card. They didn't know about school report cards, period. And they thought it would be helpful to get information in the mail about it. Some of them said that. Am I on the right track, Darren? Is that right? Yeah. And that some of them were saying they just wanted more of a heads up about a report card for their schools. So that was interesting and kind of new information I think we didn't have before. And then this also is in line with our recommendations, which is that the report card should provide information that goes beyond the basics, which, I think, to be fair, OSSE's report card does. So I think all of this is stuff we can review. My question for this committee is there any of this that we want to share in any way beyond, is this more than just an internal document? I mean, this is an internal document. The information, is there anything we want to do with it? Do we want to do any more engagement? Do we want to collect more input on our recommendations to do what with, right? Like part of what we talked about at our last meeting was coordinating with OSSI. So ostensibly, I'm thinking we want to share some of this or all of it with them for their engagement, for their, to use as they see fit, maybe. I don't know. So I'm just throwing out ideas. Any thoughts on any of this? My cats are fighting behind me. Hey.
I mean, the main thing I would say is, we've done a good amount of engagement on this. At this point, it's all pretty consistent. It was captured in our resolution. It's captured in other things. At this point, it seems to me what's going to happen on the report card is going to happen in the next term. And for us to do more, it doesn't seem like it's all that productive. I think, we want to pass on to the next board what we've learned. Mainly that's in the resolution. I don't know that there's anything more, aside from, the report on the engagements, but I don't know that there's more or different at this point.
Representative Sutter, did you have any thoughts?
No, I'm inclined to agree with Representative Wattenberg. I do not have any updates on OSSI's planned engagement. They did mention that it would be in winter, but that term is loose. And at the last leadership meeting, which happened on Monday, we'll expect to get notes out to colleagues about those meetings early next week, with the working session and committee meetings this week. It's been a little tight. But the leadership conversation, we asked if there were any updates. There were no updates. So I don't have any other substantive thoughts on how to best coordinate. If there's anything that to you, Representative Gasoy, or to our staff that sticks out as supplementary to what's already been codified and captured, as Representative Wattenberg said in the resolution, then it might make sense for us to draft a letter to OSSI. If it's not different, if it's mostly the same, I think we could simply make sure that that is passed along to OSSI as a reminder of where the board stands on the recommendations.
Okay, I think that makes sense. Okay. Well, if there's not more discussion on that, I think we can move to the next topic. So any other thoughts, Ruth?
No, I'm good.
Okay, good. So update on OSSI. Oh no, that was that. Okay, so the well-rounded education research discussion, Darren was going to share some updates he spoke with Alex to get a sense of capacity and suggested timeline. And so he's going to share that. One thing I will say, Darren, I forgot to tell you, was that I did reach out to Chelsea Coffin because I learned that she is interested in doing research on course offerings. She had reached out to us to ask if we, she knew, I guess, that we had done some research pre-pandemic to find or on schedules or something. Anyway, long and the short is that I am going to speak with her next week just to see if there's a way that we could either, build on each other's research, make it complementary, whatever, just, it seems like there's some opportunity there for working together on this in some way, even if it just means being aware of each other's research and making it speak to each other. So just wanted to share that.
One thought on that when you talk to her is, course offerings suggests that it's a middle school, high school issue. And for me, I really felt that the way in which the tests squeeze out social studies, science, and so on. It's really an elementary school issue because once you're in the higher grades, you have course times, whenever you're taking arts and so on. So you might just suggest to her that she think about including elementary too, or putting, because I really think that's what really gets lost in this.
Okay, thank you. That's a good point, Ruth. Anything else?
My only question on that, again, I'm inclined to agree with Representative Wattenberg that the elementary grades are where we hear from a lot of folks that social studies and science instruction is pushed to the side or is not aligned with what the time expectations are for those subjects in those grades. What I'm less clear on is whether we have any suggestions to offer to the DC Policy Center or even any questions that we would encourage them to make sure they think through as they would approach this. One is, how do you get at what's actually happening in the elementary grades, which is maybe more difficult to do than in the middle and high school grades when you can look at actual sort of rostered schedules, right? Like a sixth grader is enrolled in a foreign language class and a music class, and because there are bell schedules, so to speak, which is very different than a self-contained elementary classroom, where what is on paper might be very different than what is actually happening. So I just wonder if there are ways that the board may want to try to send along some of the things I know we've discussed at length in previous committee meetings about this topic, because I think it's important to look at the elementary grades, but also we've already done many rounds on like why that's more difficult and whether there might be a way we can inform their own discussions or their own thinking about how to approach that research.
I think that makes sense. The two things that I am thinking about in that sense is, one, interviews with teachers, because teachers know, I mean, you can ask teachers how many minutes, how many hours, how many times did you address social studies, science, history, whatever this week, is one way to do it. And the other way, which we had talked about in the context of the project that we couldn't do because of the pandemic, but which was fully ready to go, was to look at assignments, to ask teachers, as I recall, sort of let's see your deck of assignments for the past several weeks and sort of see what it is. And it just reminds me that we do have that all ready to go. I mean,
I know.
So somehow that just, yeah.
We do. And we also, I think we talked about this last time. I was also interested in looking at the TNTP proposal that we had ready to go for the standards research, because I think that might be a good model for, model's not the right word, method for what we're interested in as well. It was more of a case study approach, and so it would go more in depth. And the thought being to do exactly what you're saying, Ruth, to be able to interview teachers and actually observe in their classrooms. That was part of it. And then also, one thing I'm interested in is understanding, like, even when it's on paper or, teachers show us what the lesson is, who's getting pulled out. There are students who consistently don't have access to that part of the curriculum because they're getting pulled out for various services. So I think that's important to know as well. And that's hard to get at that without sort of digging in, and talking to folks. So,
yeah.
So I
agree.
All right. Darren, do you want
Can I
to
just say, I mean,
Oh, yeah.
so one thing is we can, offer up these ideas to Chelsea, because I think they, if she can do them, that's great. No pride of authorship. I also wonder if there, if there is some way to sort of move this forward or move it to the next board. I mean, it's, it should be undertaken. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we can do a vote to move it and move it forward, or it should wait until the next time. But it is a shame, all these resources went into putting that together. And then because of the pandemic, it got shut down.
That's
And I know
right.
there is some money in the budget to support something like this. So I don't know where to go with that. I imagine, Jessica would have a lot to do with whether or not we could do it. So,
Wait, what do you mean? I mean, what you're saying, I think is, or what I'm hearing, Ruth, is this needs to be picked up by at least some members of the next
well, I
board.
mean, the question
Jessica will not be
is,
there.
is it something that could be put into place now?
Oh, I
Or-
think that's what so Darren will share that. I think that's the
Oh,
idea would be to do it before December, to get it rolling before December for sure. But,
Oh.
but let's hear what Darren has to say. One other thing, Ruth, I just want to clarify though, is that, what was ready to go pre-pandemic for the well-rounded was a survey. And I was not happy with it, to be frank. It became a very convoluted sort of survey, I think, because we were trying to put a lot of different things into it. Like, it wasn't just the well-rounded education. I think we were trying to find out about teacher retention and a few other things. I think it was called the all teacher survey in the end. So that's why I was interested in looking at the TNTP plan, because I think that is a more,
No, I agree. And that's the one where we were going to look at the assignments and I agree with you.
okay, cool. Just wanted to make sure.
I couldn't remember which was which, but yeah, I agree. I
So
mean,
can
I think-
Go
Sure.
ahead, Jeff.
I just want to ask a clarifying question about what Darren's going to share with us, because the A&A committee had in their work plan this well-rounded education that was pushed to FY23. So we're there now, and it's great and fine that we can go ahead and have a discussion about the scope of that. The second question I have is, I would feel better if the two continuing members of this committee also got to weigh in before anything was moved, simply because they will be the folks who will be present to, help evaluate whether the contract was as expected or whether there were other questions that need to be negotiated with the vendors come January. And then 3 is not in any way to change the plan, but just for us all to be aware of. I mentioned this in the working session. After our FY23 budget was finalized, the mayor announced 2 cost of living adjustments to staff salaries. So that 1.5% COLA, which already took effect, and the 2.5% COLA, which is about to take effect, are not accounted for in the FY23 budget. So those cost of living adjustments are basically being absorbed by our existing budget, which means it probably will require reprogramming from the programmatic non-personnel funds to the personnel funds budget at some point during the fiscal year. Roma Battle on our team explained to me that that's typically done halfway through the fiscal year. It's not something that would happen immediately. So given the size of this contract, I don't think it would affect in any meaningful way the ability to do a good job and a robust job on this project. I simply want us to think about, like, if there's a range of amount of money we want to spend on it, that even if it were, say, $20,000 to $35,000, that we would aim for something in the middle, giving our next board colleagues and our staff maximum flexibility with reprogramming. So simply to just name that for all of us, that as we go ahead and plan this out, that we're just mindful that we're not we're being fiscally conservative with our bids and our approaches for this project, as well as any others that we're bidding now, because it will have an impact on the next board cohort.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, one nice thing I think, just for expediency, is if we did decide that it made sense, and by we, I mean the full committee, that it made sense to basically use the TNTP plan, maybe we could it could expedite the process of, I think, actually, I'm not sure we're allowed to do that. So anyway, that's all. Yeah. Okay, Darren, tell us what you know.
So right now, and just really quickly on what you just said about just having that plan, I think would help with the vendor, whoever we end up going with. The more detailed it is and the less back and forth, the faster we can start the project. And so right now, I think we were discussing last committee meeting, coming up with a timeline, like a proposed like list of questions and what we want, like the goals of this. And I think that we were kind of postponing that timeline and those goals and what we actually want to do until perhaps November. So we don't have like that timeline or proposed goals for the project just yet, just based on staff capacity. But I think it's good that you're talking with Chelsea. I think that will be very helpful to like further get an idea of what the state board can add to the conversation around well-rounded education, and even help the vendor if help the vendor understand what is like other projects going on at the moment,
Right.
so that they could perhaps provide their own expert opinion on which way the project should go. So I think what I'm going to do is just continue to work with staff and continue to get an idea of like build a draft out, something that then accountability and assessment committee members can review, provide input on in terms of the timing of this, like the scope of this project, the timing of it, and the goals, what exactly we want to learn from it. And maybe even I could put together something that would just help gather high level thoughts on that. But
Yeah,
I think just the main, like having in place what we want to know more about. And I think this would come after your discussion with Chelsea,
mhm.
as well as how we could use that information. I think that would be helpful also to the vendor of just how we're using it, similar to the board governance focus group. We explained to the vendor, this is how we're going to use it, and it helped them write the report around how we're going to use it. So instead of recommendations, it ended up being takeaways from what focus groups were saying. So just having those goals of how we're going to use this research would be also very helpful. So just in a nutshell, I think immediately, like following this meeting, maybe just gathering high level thoughts on like what we want to learn from it, as well as maybe questions to ask Chelsea Coffin, and then from there in November building out a timeline.
Yeah, that would be helpful if you all want to share, and I'll maybe send an email to the full committee to get questions from Jacques and Carlene as well.
So can I just want to be clear on one thing, if it's possible, insofar as we can, I mean, we can quickly respond to Chelsea with the good ideas that we have or the ideas that we have, insofar as we can get something off for, procurement. I'm for doing it faster, let's
Yeah.
move it.
So Darren, weren't you going to say something about that? Or did I miss that timeline that Alex suggested waiting?
Yeah, so it was just something that we didn't have a lot of capacity for this past month to really work on. But I mean, that will be something that I'll be working on, is the timeline. So it hasn't, I don't have anything to report back yet on a timeline, But that is something that I will be working on.
Okay. So, but okay, so maybe I misunderstood before. So I think what you're saying is we could start to just kind of put together a proposal now to send out. I thought you were saying that Alex wanted to wait till November. Which is just too.
I think wait until November to start coming up with like a timetable proposal. Like I have to sit down and really like put together,
Oh, I see. Okay,
like get the, like, start the proposal now, reach out to, like, start opening a bid for vendors, so on and so forth. So I would have to kind of come up with kind of like a statement of work, different, there are like different parts to this, so it's what are those parts and a timetable for when those should be executed. And that's what I have not started yet. But that is something that I'd like to start soon. And I think it's, and I think with the backdrop of your discussion with Chelsea, I think it will further inform exactly what will go in the something like a statement of work and where we're going with that. I don't think it really impacts the timetable. I think I could just build that out while you talk to Chelsea, but as far as the timetable is concerned, that has not been started yet.
okay.
And
So-
and I think even building, maybe I could have further discussions, especially when Jacques, Carlene are back, just on the cost of this as well.
Okay. So just to make sure I understand, sounds like we can start like coming up with the plan, refining it, and getting it to you, Darren, but that your time sort of to work on this really is not going to start until November. So in terms of getting like a timeline to us and starting work on a RFP, so what it's called, that wouldn't start till November, right? Okay.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you. Jessica?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, because I don't remember and I don't have our project plan handy. What was the range we thought this contract would cost? I remember,
Yeah.
am I remembering correctly? It was somewhere like in the 25-35 range.
I don't remember, but we have that, right, Darren? You shared it with me. Let me see if I can find it real quick.
That
By
sounds
value.
right based on my recollection.
That's what you remember?
I'm pulling it up right now. It should be in the chat. So for that project, it would be 32,000.
Okay, good memory.
Okay.
Not my, I'm just looking at the chart.
Well, I'm talking to Jessica. She
Oh, okay.
That's
yeah.
That's helpful, I think, just as, you know, to Darren's point, like if this actual process of putting a statement of work and opening the bid happens in November, that means there's a couple of weeks left for the committee, it sounds like, to sort of get ideas together around, is it the TNTP study plus or minus some things? Is it a piece of that idea, but maybe some things rethought, so that Darren and the team are as ready as they can be to go. I'll add one more factor just for all of us to keep in mind, is that our hoped for new ED will be coming on board officially on November 21st, which is a DC HR onboarding day, but is hopeful to have some prior conversations that would just begin to inform them about what work is afoot. So hopefully we'd be able to roll the status of this into some of those pre-onboarding conversations, so that we have another hopeful committee member who would like to join.
It's very persistent.
Or at least the tail would like to join. But just that might be another thing we think about as we put into the time frame, is making sure we can bring our new ED up to speed as quickly as possible, so that they can also be an ally in this.
That's cool. Thank you for that update. Okay, I think we have a way forward here. I will send out an email to the whole committee with the TNTP report and some ideas that we've come up with today, just to get input. And I talked to Chelsea on Tuesday, I believe, Tuesday evening, and I'll also ask everybody to send me any questions they think I should ask. Also, Darren, about sharing with her, is there any, just let me know in an email, I guess, if there's anything we don't want to share, like maybe talk with Alex and leadership about that, from that folder. That would be the old well-rounded education folder. Otherwise, I think we can share whatever she wants from it, share the whole thing, and I guess, I mean, as long as we're in communication with them about what we're each doing. Right? Okay. Okay. Yay. So the last thing on this agenda is, I just had some thoughts on the alternatives to park. I don't think, given our short remaining time on the board, I do think this is something for the next folks to pick up if they want. But what I will say is that, my thinking on it is that we are going to have a state accountability test, right? And so for me, what's more important is thinking about how we do it, how, some of the issues that we know come up around state testing is the narrowing of the curriculum, too much time being taken up during the school year for prep, and then some issues around, teaching to the test interfering with validity. But really the first two are the issues that I think are most commonly cited as problematic. So, I don't think switching to a new test will address those issues. And so that is why I have been most interested in learning more about the through-year assessment idea, which does address those issues. And so my one proposal here that I'd like to get your thoughts on is, what do you think about either bringing folks to our next committee meeting to talk to us from states that are trying this, to hear why they decided to do it, how it's going, what the challenges are, that kind of thing, or having a panel at our, one of our either November or December public meetings. I don't know if we already have panels planned, so that's all. Just some thoughts. There are currently, I believe, 11 states doing some form of through or trying this. It's new everywhere. Like, I first heard about it at the NASB conference in 2019, and it was, I believe, Georgia. It's just some districts were part of the alternative assessment cohort under ESSA, and now there's like a bunch more. So if they're doing it, it's very new. So thoughts?
I think it's a great idea to have some folks come speak to the committee to sort of educate us about the different approaches to assessments and sort of like pros and cons. I wonder if it might be worthwhile to see if someone from a state was, sorry, I'm getting the unstable internet warning. If someone from a state was able to join us, but also if there was someone, a researcher or someone who deals with assessments more generally, to talk at the level up from that. So we would hear like a state implementation level, and then one level up, which is benefits of a through course versus a summative, what can be learned from either or, and then answers to some of the critiques you noted, Representative Gasoy, around like whether these through course assessments address all of those, some of those create new issues, it might be helpful to have sort of two folks who could speak to those two things, but I like that idea a lot.
I do too. The one issue I'd also add, and maybe Emily, you're suggesting that we can't do a second one, that we should just focus on that. I mean, I think this issue, and it's been dealt with in Louisiana, although I think they may be backtracking a bit, but you know, the idea of setting up the test so that it is connected to particular content, so that there is an incentive on the part of the schools to teach the content, not just to go to the reading and math and the comprehension skills and all that. And Louisiana, I think, was sort of the, you know, ahead of the pack on that. But, you know, I think Barbara Davidson at Standards Work would be very up on that. Also, Natalie Wexler, although I don't know that she follows the assessment so much, probably Barbara Davidson is the best. Also David Steiner, I guess, or what's the name of the other people up at Hopkins, I think, followed that a lot.
Ashley Berner.
Ashley Berner, yeah, she might be the best to who knows about it.
Great. Yeah, no, that's right, Ruth. I mean, I guess it gets at what I'm trying to highlight here, which is we want to look at how to address the actual issues, right? As opposed to just talking about a better test per se. So I think that's
sort of what are ways in which assessments could address some of the bad consequences of current testing, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. So yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. The other thing that just comes to mind is that it's a very different approach, but it might be worth looking at New York. So they have their elementary and middle school assessments, but then they have their Regents assessments, and the Regents have been around forever. And they are through course assessments in that same way. Like they're summative, but they are aligned to the content of the standards. So like when you take the biology Regents, it should be a summation of everything you were supposed to learn in the New York State standards aligned with biology. And then you take the Regents exam. Because they're subject area tests. They're like Algebra 1 Regents, Algebra 2 Regents, Trigonometry Regents. And because their system is old, like my parents took the Regents exams, I took the Regents exams, it might be worth to see like how that might contrast with places like Louisiana, which has done such good work, but also had a lot of political changes in their ed space, or somewhere like Georgia where it's newer. I know the Regents only apply to high school, so that's the one drawback, is it's like not an elementary or middle school solution, but it is a high school approach.
Interesting. Okay.
And also, it has changed a good bit recently and has come under some criticism as well as some support. I don't know enough about it. I still think I agree with Jessica that is worth looking at, because it is sort of an approach, and the approach hasn't changed. Just something about it has. That's an attention.
It's interesting. You know, I did some day job work in New York State this year and got to watch high schools as students prepared for their Regents. So it was, in every sense of the word, test prep, but they were these packets of like unit review on like mitochondria and the cells. So it looked much more like collegiate preparation for like a summative assessment of your knowledge than it did like some of the things we've heard real critique on in terms of time away from instruction for test prep. This was more like comprehensive knowledge review of what we learned this year in preparation for an assessment, which I think sounds like what you're getting at, which is like that's a way in which teaching to the test is really reviewing what we learned versus preparing for an assessment that is disconnected from what we.
By the way, you know, one person or kind of person that would be very interesting to get in that context is someone who, you know, I'm thinking Dan Willingham, but there's others who really understands the whole cognitive science around retrieval, because part of the idea of a good assessment anyway is you assess it, you learn it, you say it, you remember it, you know, and that's makes it important to have a test that's about things worth knowing. And that's not always how we go about our tests also. So that could be an interesting person as well, type of person.
Great. Darren, do you need Ruth and Jessica to share those names they mentioned with you?
I'm recording it and taking notes, so I'll note this in our action items as well as the committee report.
Great. So it sounds like what we're saying is, yes, it would be good to have folks come either to our November or December committee meeting, which we should decide when it is, I guess. We changed this month, so I would suggest we just go back to our usual second Friday at 10, right? Is that what it was? I think so. And invite, but if they can't make that, then maybe we can figure out from there. Does
So
that-
I have one question on the timing, which is, I still think it would be great to really encourage a lot of public comment, particularly from young people on the community service requirements. So, I mean, I wonder if we can sort of build, I hope we can build that into the November meeting, and maybe that means voting on those requirements in December, but I do feel like we really need to hear from the students and the folks in the schools that are going to be affected by that.
All right, this
That
totally.
might affect when we would do this.
Oh, okay. I was wondering what the
I'm
connection
raising it.
is. Okay,
So
Yeah.
I want to clarify my understanding, because I think I heard Representative Gasoy say these are people we would invite to a committee meeting. But Representative Wattenberg, based on what you just said, I think I'm hearing you say you're thinking about these folks at a public meeting.
Well, I was, and I think it would be great at a public meeting, but I also know that there may be other things, you know, in the hopper for that. But I do think it would be great at a public meeting, but that's all I'll say.
should we raise it at the working session, or is that too late? Or maybe
So,
in a,
I would
yeah.
say at the November public meeting, we were just discussing in leadership that has been already on our meeting tracker in our OneDrive, dedicated to governance. So there'll be a governance panel at the public meeting who will come talk about the 8 takeaways from the governance committee in preparation for the governance committee bringing the board a report and resolution for the December working session and public meeting. So November's public meeting is spoken for. December's public meeting is a little more in the air. If the social studies standards are out for public review, the hope was to use that time, which was supposed to be last December, when we were having a public panel on this topic. If the
Yeah.
standards are out, the hope is to use this, yeah, exactly, a year later. But the hope is to use this month for that, the December panel for that. All that is to say, when I know more about December, I'm happy to share that back. But I do think pursuing this for a committee meeting is a 100% like a great idea. Representative Wattenberg, or Representative Gasoy, I'd like to ask Representative Wattenberg about this community service thing, but I don't want to derail the meeting. So
Yeah, I guess just to close this conversation, another thought is to make this a webinar discussion. So maybe not doing it during our normal meeting, but it could take the place of our regular meeting. Because I don't think we have a lot more to discuss beyond the research, which, you know, is
Yeah.
important that we can do. I don't know. So anyway, that's just another thought, is to do a webinar at a time when people can join, and it's more of a like advertised, please come and listen kind of thing. So
That's good by me.
okay, so I'll also share that as an idea in the email to the committee, the whole committee. Okay, go ahead, Jess, sorry.
yeah, no, that's okay. So Representative Wattenberg, on the community service piece, my understanding is that OSSI is going to bring us back their final proposal in November and request it at our November public meeting. Can you just say more about the hoped for engagement and the rationale for pushing back a vote in your estimation? I just want to be.
Yeah, I mean, I would, so when the board engaged people around community service, I guess 4 years ago, I forget the exact time, there was a lot of concern with it. I wouldn't call it hostility, but there was a lot of sentiment against having it, certainly at the level that it was at. So I think Aussie did a terrific job of sort of updating the way they think about this and changing a number of things, but I really think we should hear from a broad group of people who raised concerns about this before to see if this, resolves it, or if they still have some concerns. I think it would be useful for Aussie as well to know whether or not it meets those concerns. And, if not, okay, maybe that's fine. And maybe there's still some things that could be done better. So what I had raised when we heard from them was, to try to encourage such people, students, advocates who have been involved in this, people who spoke on it before, to come to our public meeting last week. And I'm sure because of just the backup of a lot of stuff, that did not happen, but it would be great if we could do that for the November meeting and then vote on it in December. I just think we owe it to the public to hear that response. And I think Aussie might be very, open to that. I don't know, because it just means they'd get the benefit of that feedback. So that's all.
I just want to ask one more question, which is around the timing of notifying LEAs that they need to support their students for the requirement. So Aussie did say, Dr. Grant noted in her public remarks on Wednesday night that the intention is that this year's seniors will need to do 25 hours. So if we vote in November on the 16th, students have the entire month of December, as well as, say, January through May to get that complete. If we don't vote till December, students only begin to have that time in January. Do you have any thoughts on that?
So I had raised then, and I followed up with an email to Justin Tooley. I actually think it's not a good idea to expect 25 hours from this year's seniors.
I'm just going to pause you there, because I saw the email and I know you raised it, but Aussie has made clear that the proposal they're bringing us is for 25 hours. So I don't think they're going to flex on that.
My impression from the presentation, and in fact from the email from Justin, is actually that they were not totally done with that decision. That was my impression.
Wednesday's public comment from the superintendent, she stated 25 hours for seniors.
Okay, well,
so maybe you know more, but that I will just say that.
I guess that was a decision made subsequent to my hearing something different from Justin, and also I guess I didn't fully understand. Anyway, it didn't sound to me like it was definite, but that it's here nor there. I mean, I either way, I would suggest that as a board, we need to get that public input, and part of what we might propose is that, so it'll be in December, and so let's lower that amount. But that's my personal view. I think it's an important issue, and it's come up before, and we shouldn't, it deserves to be taken seriously. I think Aussie has put a lot of effort into it, and I think they've done a really great job, and we shouldn't short circuit the public comment on it.
Okay, I appreciate the insights. I will say I don't agree that the public comment has been short circuited. I would certainly welcome more public comment on the matter. I know our SAC had the chance to meet with Aussie and provide feedback. So we did hear from a set of students. We did invite folks to come to the October meeting. I don't know what else we could be doing. Okay, sorry.
I wasn't aware of that.
Just hijack your meeting.
That's okay. You can continue. I do need to jump off.
Yeah, no, I'm done.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all. So lots of follow-up. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.